Hello, this is H.B. Snyder, Senior Geophysicist for NEOS Geosolutions. Thank you for taking your time to review our Ventura Basin analysis. I think you will see some new exploration ideas that will interest you. In early 2011, this year, NEOS acquired, processed, interpreted, and fused with conventional data a multi-measurement geoscientific data set over the onshore portion of the Ventura Basin, located in Southern California, as outlined within the dashed oval seen on this slide. The purpose of this project was to look for new exploration opportunity in a very explored basin that had produced since 1861. Because of the basin's proximity to several of the premier technical universities in America and its prolific production history, the Ventura Basin was one of the most studied and drilled basins in the USA. The study area, shown in the red outline, covers approximately 1,300 square miles and delineated the area for acquisition of gravity, magnetic, and hyperspectral data using fixed-wing aircraft. Note the significant amount of production annotated in black and the large number of dry holes shown in blue. As shown on the left-hand side of this slide, the columnar section portion, the basin has oil and gas production across the entire sedimentary section, inclusive of all of the tertiary and the upper portion of the Cretaceous. On the right-hand side of this slide, the production by well and stratigraphic unit portion, note the large geographic extent of production from the major producing units such as the Pico shown in blue and the Sespe shown in red. This indicates a very widespread depositional system required for both intervals. To properly understand the regional structure of this tectonically active basin, NEOS generated a 3D volume of the four major producing units by creating the 13 cross-sections shown in yellow in the upper half of the slide. For simplicity, speed, and a regional view of the basin, the 7 major faults shown in the lower half of the slide were put into the model. As you can see in this slide, the final product was a 3D structural model of the basin that showed the position of the top 4 producing stratigraphic intervals relative to each other and to the major faults. The detail of this model and its usefulness was a direct reflection of the detail of the input data, including the number of faults and the stratigraphic intervals included. Regional data input produced the regional model that you see in this slide. Clients who input prospect exploration detail data would obtain a proprietary prospect model to use for own-account purposes. The hyperspectral data generated a geobotanical analysis of the basin shown in this slide, an environmental baseline, if you will. The legend in the lower right shows non-stressed flora as green grading to stressed flora as red. The known seeps are shown in red dots. The bounding absorption spectra shown in the lower left were used to identify and define stress levels for all of the plants. Urban areas are masked in gray. From this slide, it is obvious that seeps do not cause the majority of the vegetation stress found in this basin. Good information to have in many basins these days. Note the area of densely populated seeps shown in the upper left-hand portion of this slide, an area which we will now expand upon in the next slide. Localized hyperspectral data analysis identified oil in the river, green dots, on and along the roads, green dots, and mixed with soil, red circles around clusters of green dots. Note that the hyperspectral imaged the faults along the river, the position of oil in the river, and oil along the roads. Again, good information to have in some basins these days prior to the commencement of work. The picture in the lower left corner is a pool of oil in the river found by the hyperspectral analysis, just like the oil found in bar ditches along the roads. The picture in the lower right are very stressed plants due to oil seeping from a road cut. Ground truth teams who took these pictures were used to verify these findings. The hyperspectral data were also analyzed to produce an environmental baseline showing oil seeps, rose-colored areas, with oil-soil mixtures, also rose-colored areas, with known seeps, the yellow colors, and with urban areas masked in gray. Again, the hydrocarbon seeps were identified and could be shown relative to the client's work areas prior to the initiation of said work. The Bouguer gravity map was used to image the gross geometry and the sedimentary fill of the basin. It showed the outline of the basin, reentrance, sediment thickness variations, shelves, platforms, and ridges, all potential exploration targets. Identifying small crenulations in the basin perimeter or variations in the basin's sediment thickness can provide very lucrative exploration targets. High-pass filtered gravity data was used to identify the outline of the basin and intra-basin variations with depth, as seen in this slide. Here, cool colors are thicks and hot colors represent thins. A series of these filtered gravity data sets were used to identify the changing boundaries of the basin and sediment variations with depth. Note the basin perimeter variations and the increase in the frequency of the density variations as one follows the arrows from the 25-kilometer gravity map shown in the lower right to the 7.5-kilometer gravity map shown in the upper left. Using this method, one can see the basin boundaries and the development of intrabasin sediment variations versus depth. The basic magnetic data used were the reduced-to-pole data that showed at least 3 distinct areas of magnetic susceptibility. The interpretation of this slide is that the large area to the northwest is a combination of volcanics and metasediments, and the 2 areas seen to the south and southeast are areas heavily influenced by volcanics and intrusives, some deep and some shallow. Note the distinct linear northwest to southeast trend located in the upper right side of the slide. This is the San Gabriel fault system. This particular slide is the tilt derivative of the reduced-to-pole data with the interpretation of major faulting as interpreted from a number of magnetic derivative types being shown as the white lines. In this basin, most of the significant faults can be identified using the magnetic data set. Note that the San Gabriel fault in the northeast section of this slide is again the distinct northwest to southeast linear trend. This slide is a portion of the total horizontal gradient of the tilt derivative, which is used to emphasize magnetic edges and magnetic bodies. The entities circled in black have been interpreted to be magnetic bodies. Note how well the oil fields, the black dots, and the gas field, the red dots, are bounded by the individual elements of this particular interpretation. Note that the blue dots are dry holes. Using the outlines of the magnetic bodies interpreted in the previous slide to produce a fault density map shown in this slide, one can obtain an understanding of how well the known production correlates with the interpretation. In this case, almost all of the production is contained within the bounds of this trend analysis. The structural model, the gravity data, and the magnetic data were used to generate a 3D basin model that allowed the inversion of the basement as shown in this slide. The hydrocarbon production in black and the dry holes in blue were annotated to assist in defining areas of new opportunity. This model agrees with several prior studies of the basin, which estimated over 60,000 feet of sediment in the thickest portions of the basin, shown as purple in this slide. The 2 final products in the fusion process were the 2 hydrocarbon predictive index maps, one for oil and one for gas, Each mathematically fused all of the appropriate data and interpretations to produce a regional analysis of hydrocarbon potential in the basin, high potential being the hot colors and low potential being the cool colors in this slide. In this subset of the oil map, note the strong correlation of anticipated oil correlating with the fields in the lower half of the slide and in the upper right of the slide. The oil and gas potential maps captured the producing trends as one would anticipate in a regional analysis and provided support for future exploration. The summary of this project is that NEOS acquired, processed, and interpreted the data for the entire onshore portion of the Ventura Basin quickly and relatively inexpensively. The gravity data identified the basin geometry and its sedimentary variations. The magnetic data identified the basin structures, including significant faults and the effects of volcanism. The hyperspectral data provided an environmental baseline inclusive of hydrocarbon seeps and a quick geologic map. Seismic and geologic data sets were melded with the acquired data to produce integrated interpretations used in the fusion process and for exploration purposes. Overall, the survey proved to be quite effective at identifying numerous exploration opportunities in a basin that had been extensively studied, explored, and produced since 1861. NEOS thanks you for your time and appreciates your visit. We hope that we have provided you with some new and stimulating ideas for consideration. Please feel free to call on us at any time. Thank you very much.